Thank you, Lauren. And thank you for all of you who are attending today's Awards Town Hall. We are in the process of transforming ACRL's awards program, and this transformation is being framed by the recent ACRL Awards Task Force report submitted to the board in January of 2022. At our meeting today, it's intended that we'll provide you with a short history of recent board activities and actions as it relates to awards, offer the opportunity for you to learn more directly from Marinda Hensley and from Aaron Smith about the awards task force. They are the awards task force co-chairs, and they're going to talk about the work that they undertook and the reasoning behind their recommendations, and to offer an opportunity for you to ask questions and to provide some input on the next steps as we advance the awards task force recommendations. I would like to remind everyone of our statement of appropriate conduct, which says in part, ACRL seeks to provide a meeting environment in which diverse participants may learn, network, and enjoy the company of colleagues in an environment of mutual respect. We recognize a shared responsibility to create and hold that environment for the benefit of all. And I appreciate everyone's investment in this conversation about awards, and I look forward to receiving constructive input about how we advance the awards task force recommendations to transform the awards program. So that we can field as many questions as possible, as you heard from Lauren at the introduction, we are going to use the Q&A session format to be able to make sure that we see everything that's coming in. We can look at it based upon themes and try to address as many themes as possible in the short time that we have together today. There is no open chat. However, when we get to the portion of the meeting where we are asking for input on next steps, there will be an opportunity to raise your hand and be unmuted so that you could speak at that time. We do ask that comments remain brief so that we can have as many participants as possible share their feedback. And we'll also have an email address where you could send something that's more detailed after this meeting. So if there is something much more detailed, certainly there will be another further opportunity for you. At the end, we will do a Q&A period, but because it's a short time that we have together, we really do want to focus on making sure people are informed and then getting some feedback. And we'll get to as many questions during this time. I want to give you a little bit of history of what's happened with the awards program, really since 2016, when a board, the ACRL board did establish a task force to review ACRL awards related to funding policies and ways that the awards are created. Based upon that report that was submitted, a working group was created and further analyzed awards at that time in the context of the recommendations that were presented. The results from that process were that the board approved a 5-year moratorium on establishing new awards, and they developed new processes that established parameters around how section funding, they had new processes for establishing parameters for how section funding for awards happened. The moratorium is still in place. It's not set to expire until 2023. At midwinter of 2021, continuing concerns about the sustainability of the awards program led to a renewed discussion at a midwinter board meeting. There are continued concerns about the current funding model. It's subsidized by ACRL staff program and process, as well as the need to review the awards program through the lens of inclusivity. Input from the awards committee chairs was sought before the discussion took place at the board, and that was part of the conversation. After robust discussion, the board did decide to pause the awards program for 1 year and asked the task force to do quite a bit of work during that period of time. The full charge was shared as part of the documents for this town hall, so I won't go over everything. But basically, we did ask the task force to look at how awards are funded. Is there overlap with awards? what are the mechanisms for the awards process? Is it sustainable? We had some concerns about competing sponsor funding, the way that awards were being required to do work year over year to maintain that funding, as well as looking at this through an equity lens. What are we valuing? Who are we valuing? And is it the right things? Have we really taken into account our core value of EDI as we think this through? So there was quite a bit that went into that process. In January of 2022, they provided a very extensive report of a pretty deep dive that they did in a one-year process as quickly as possible to try to meet that deadline of knowing that awards were paused and that it was a program that we were interested in coming to some conclusion about what to do next. There were a number of recommendations, and they were in a point where part of the recommendation is further investigation is needed. We accepted that report, thanked the task force the work, and as we continued to look at what to do next, we realized that there were some challenges in continuing to have the awards program as it currently stands resume, as well as trying to look into all of those recommendations and move them forward. ACRL, in the meantime, did lose a staff person, the one who was in charge of awards and did know the most detail about how to manage that process. So there were changes in terms of staff capacity, as well as the large number of substantial recommendations that needed to be investigated further. We wanted to make sure that there is time and energy in order to move those forward. Some of these things had been surfaced in the 2017 awards task force. And so we recognize there are lingering issues that need to be explored and understood better and resolved. This is member-driven task forces who are telling us repeatedly that we need to look at this further and make some changes. So with that, we also had some unresolved financial challenges that needed to be taken care of. At the spring board meeting, the ACRL board did vote to continue the pause until we've resolved what is next. And what we would like to do is then introduce awards again in a transformed way. So we will keep the awards paused until a next task force can actually work through some of these challenges and have an implementation strategy, something that this last task force did not have the luxury of time in order to do. So with that, what I would like to do is turn it over to Aaron Smith and to Miranda Hensley to share a little bit about the work that they did and the recommendations that they came out with. I know that you have the opportunity to submit questions throughout. I do recommend that you pause on doing that until you've heard from Aaron and Miranda. They may answer some of the questions that you have. Do know that that's available to you anytime. Having a little bit of patience until you've heard from them might be helpful. So,
Julie, before Aaron and Miranda start, we have a question about if you could repeat your comments on the funding model. I think that maybe some papers were rustling against the microphone and some people couldn't quite hear that.
Oh, my apologies. I had to write it all out. There's been a lot that's happened. So yeah, so there were some challenges in terms of how funding is still continuing to happen with the current awards. Those that have sponsors, there are a few awards that do, but a number do not. And there's continual need to do that work in order to garner support for awards going forward. That is, I think, what I was trying to express. Thank you. Sorry about that.
Okay, let me share my screen, and we're going to go into that a little bit in our presentation as well. Hey, can everyone see that? All right. So Miranda's actually going to start us off. I'm Erin, and I'm excited to be here with you today.
Great, thanks, Erin. Hi, everyone. I'm Miranda Hensley, and I'm the co-chair of this awards task force with Erin. We're so excited to be here with you today, and we're really looking forward to the conversation. So thanks for taking the time to be here. Next slide, please. We had a diverse membership on our task force here. We had folks from many different kinds of institutions. We had folks who belonged to sections and those who did not, people who have won awards and those who have not, and also served on award committees and have not. For Erin and I, Erin was the award winner for the Innovation in College Librarianship Award through the College and Libraries section for her work at Westminster. And I have been involved in awards in the past, and my role as the past chair of the instruction section, I chaired the Miriam Dudley Award a few years ago. It is true, as Julie mentioned, that we worked pretty quickly as a committee. We had a condensed timeline, which amounted to about 10 months from the time that we were appointed until our final report was submitted to the board. And we are very grateful to our team members for accommodating that very quick turnaround time. Next slide.
All right, so Julie went over this briefly, but we really did take the charge from the board as our marching orders. So if it was in there, we did it. And if it wasn't, because of the compressed timeline, we really didn't investigate that. So just to be upfront about that. So we were asked, and this is kind of, the charge came in two parts, and we kind of thought of them as the who, and in a minute we'll talk about the what. So the who, we were specifically charged with gathering input from each award committee to understand the achievements of the awards. We were charged with seeking input from a broad cross-section of ACRL members and non-members to understand how meaningful the ACRL award program is. And I want to note that one in particular, because the fabulous work done by the 2017 committee really focused on the award committee's section leadership and the meaning of the awards to those who had won, which was great. And we really had a good foundation to build in. But the board in this study wanted us to go beyond that to expand our circle. So we did that. And we were specifically charged with conducting an environmental scan of other associations. To be honest, of these things, that one was probably the most disappointing to us because there's not a silver bullet. Surprise, right? Because there always is a silver bullet, isn't there? Not so much. But so that's the who, and this is how we tackled the who. So we really did start with all of the things that are out there on the web, ALA and ACRL documents, the things we scoured, section manuals, we read as much as we could about division. So anything that was out there on the web that described this process, we really read closely and looked for themes across all of the awards. We also spent a tremendous amount of time with that 2017 task force report and their data, because these two processes are not identical, but are complementary. So if something was asked or we learned it from the previous report, we did not ask that question again, if that makes sense. We did a deep dive on the 2021 award recipients, particularly looking at EDI components. We did that survey of award committee members because there are things that only those people know. However, we also know, because as a volunteer organization with people coming on and off of committees, that different individuals know different things. So we surveyed all of the members, and we also expanded that to, if it was an award sponsored by a section, to the leadership of that section as defined on the ACRL website. We did that survey of the broad cross-section of ACRL members and non-members. And we did an environmental scan, as we were asked to do, of other associations and organizations. So this is the second part of the charge we were given, and this is really the what. So those of you who were part of award committees, who were part of section leadership, who were on a division committee, or if you responded to that broad academic community survey. These are the things that we asked about that come straight from the board, and then we pass along to you. Because really what we wanted to know is, as best we could, the answers to these questions. And that's what we took to create the recommendations. So Julie went over those briefly, and I hate a presentation that just reads from the screen, although I'm failing at that today, my apologies. But these are the questions we asked. So we turned these things into our survey, or as we were examining the literature that is out there, these are the things we were looking for. And they are the things that resulted in our finding and recommendations that we're gonna kind of walk through with you now.
Thanks, Erin. So the value of awards was one of our primary questions, and almost 70% of our respondents in the academic library community survey indicated that they felt that awards were either very valuable or valuable to the profession. And I'll direct you back to the report if you're interested in more specifics, but I'm just going to cover a couple of highlights here for you. So some of the reasons why awards are valuable in our community is because they are part of personal career development and provide future opportunities. That includes for our folks that are tenure track, as well as new job opportunities for folks. There's also recognition of the award recipient by institution administrators and campus departments. So our institutions value when we win awards through ACRL. That's a really important piece of highlighting the work that ACRL members do as part of our association. There's also mention of idea sharing and inspiration to others. So awards often highlight activities and projects and bring attention to some of the amazing work our colleagues do. And that in and of itself is idea sharing and inspiration for us. The financial award of awards was mentioned, but it wasn't high. It wasn't valued as one of the highest items. There's also promotion of the ACRL membership unit. So the specific section that's giving the awards, it does bring attention to the work that's being done by the sections as well. So for example, the Women in Gender Studies Librarianship Awards highlights work that's happening in that specific subject field. And they also, the awards committees themselves provide important service opportunities for our ACRL members. So many of you here today have or are or will be hopefully chairing awards committees. And that is an important part of participating in association work. So if you'd like to hear more about how we value awards, please do check out that section of the report. Back to you, Erin.
Okay, so funding was probably the primary thrust of the 2017 work. So we really did learn a lot from that report, and like I said, didn't duplicate anything that was there. But we did want to see where we are now. So there was some good news. So when the 2017 report was published, 6 of the awards didn't have funding or had lost a sponsor. When we did our work, and for the 2021 season, there was one that was on pause, only one that was on pause due to lack of sponsorship. And because of the work done by the 2017 committee that allowed sections to use their basic services funds to provide awards, there was only one that wasn't being offered, which we love to see, right? However, and this is the downside, there is a sense that even from the award committee and section respondents, that the funding isn't secure. So for 45% of the people that responded to the awards committee survey indicated that the funding for their award was either very secure or secure. which isn't even half, which echoes some of the stuff that we saw from the 2017. And then the other thing that we learned from the 2017 task force report is that at the time, the award committees really wanted their awards to have multi-year commitments from sponsorship, so 3-year, 2-year contracts. And as we have lived life and we worked with Chase, like that is just not a thing very much anymore. So most of the commitments are 1-year rolling commitments, which does introduce a good bit of work on the part of ACRL staff and the volunteer committee members. So personal note, I happen to be on the college library section in leadership when we lost ProQuest, who had been the sponsor for the award that I happened to win for years and years and years. And it really did just kind of throw us for a loop in that process of trying to find somebody else, working with ACRL, but trying to find someone else to fund it really took a significant amount of time for that year. So that's funny. So just a lot of the trends that had begun and been identified and were the impetus for the work done in 2017, we are still seeing and have maybe gotten even more alarming in the work that we did in 2021. We were also charged to look at overlap and the other side of that coin, professional gaps in the awards program. And we found that both kind of according to the academic library community and the award committees and section leaders themselves, that they didn't indicate that there was, they weren't aware. They didn't know if there was significant overlap or significant gaps. But particularly in the membership survey, we did hear a lot about librarians and library work who aren't represented in the current program, particularly DE&I efforts, which we'll talk about in a moment, mid-career librarians, other than those who are recognized for individual publications, that they tend to be, end of career, lifetime achievement kind of things. And then just those of us kind of in the trenches doing great library work every day, the unseen work that library workers do. So our recommendation as a result of that is to create an overarching committee that would allow review and real-time response to the library as it, evolves, as it changes. This is tied to, again, the 2017 work, who also recommended the creation of an ad hoc committee, although their recommendation was more for the purpose of review from a broad place as opposed to a narrative or siloed kind of review. So the things that we saw in overlap and gaps, that kind of lack of awareness of, I don't know if there are gaps or I don't know if there's overlap, it's really hard to see from the perspective of your one award or of your session. So we recommend bringing it up so that the whole awards program can be reviewed.
Great, Erin, thanks. So we also were charged with looking at EDI as part of our process, and we had 3 questions that we focused on. The first is that are there trends related to EDI currently found in the ACRL awards? The second was, has the language from the core commitment been incorporated into official policies and procedures around awards? And if not, where could this language be applied in both in the selection process and in the nomination process for awards? So in order to answer these questions, we sought feedback from the community survey, which was ACRL members and non-members. And as Erin mentioned, we also reviewed existing award documentation. We wanted to better understand the progress that may have been made in the last 4 years since the core commitment. From the community survey, we saw that most members are not sure if their award furthers the ACRL's core commitment to EDI. And then there were some other really interesting comments that fueled our recommendations. The first being a willingness to redefine what achievement means, because oftentimes achievement can be used to disclude people as much as it is to include. We also were encouraged to rethink how selection committees are formed. There is a perception, which may be real or perceived, that folks choose their friends when they're on these award committees. And then also thinking about developing mechanisms for preventing implicit and explicit bias in the selection process. And then finally, the last thing was a recommendation for creating a separate EDI focused award specifically. Those are some of the things we learned from the community survey. As part of talking to the award committee members, we also saw that there was a lack of shared understanding between committee members. So for example, some committee members said there were internal review processes related to the core commitment, and other committee members of the same committee said that there wasn't. So there's some confusion about that within the committees, which isn't really surprising, I suppose, since there's turnover of these committees every year. And then the committee members also indicated that there are barriers, and again, these can be real or perceived, that reduce the number of nominations that are received during the nomination process. So for example, thinking about expanding avenues for identifying viable candidates by simplifying the nomination process. So we did see that this is possible. The instruction section's Rockman Award, for example, reduced barriers to their award nomination process in 2020. They included a self-nomination form and changed the nomination process from a letter to a web form, and that increased their nominations. So next slide, Erin, thanks. So as part of this feedback, we came up with several recommendations. Recommendation 7 is that EDI should be incorporated into all aspects of the award process. And again, that goes back to the feedback directly from the committee survey to think about things like redefining achievement, rethinking the committee appointment process, and finding ways to prevent implicit and explicit bias. We also recommended that the award eligibility criteria should be updated, and that would include specific participation in an ACRL section, because that can exclude lots of folks, and as well as the nomination process be updated. Recommendation number 9 is establishing a system of checks and balances so that a recipient doesn't receive 2 awards in the same year for the same project, which has happened, unfortunately. And then our recommendation number 10 was to create an EDI award specifically. So thank you so much, Erin. Next slide.
So before we move on to what we learned from other models, I do want to just a moment talk about some of the awards that we called out for special consideration. So for the most part, if you look at the 21 awards that are administered as part of the ACRL awards program, they have 3 common characteristics. So one is that they recognize achievement, whether that's lifetime or a particular project or publication. They are funded by a vendor sponsorship. And there's a monetary component of the award that's an honorarium. These that are the awards that are on the screen kind of fell outside of that model. And so we thought they warranted special consideration before they exactly are determined how they land. So the Lieb and the Oberle Award for bibliography are our two awards that are funded by an endowment. None of the others are. And they were also recognized by the task force and by others as specifically narrowly focused compared to the others. The Routledge Distance Learning Librarian Conference Sponsorship Award is on this list because the monetary award component is expressly designated for the very good purpose of allowing a librarian to attend the ALA conference. And this is on that list because it's similar in nature to the ACRL scholarship program. So we thought there might be an opportunity to think about that differently, even though it's, as noted in the comments, ACRL is right now only for ACRL sponsor attending in the ACRL conference, the biennial conference. And then the fourth one is the Debruder European Librarianship Study Grant, although to be named something else later, as I understand it. And this is on this list because it is an award specifically for the purpose, the very excellent purpose of furthering research, different than the kind of distinguished service kind of other awards. And then also called out here because it's similar in nature to other ACRL grants that fund work. So our recommendations in our report recognize that these things aren't like the other, and so may warrant some additional special consideration by the ad hoc committee. And then on to other models. So we were asked to look for other models to consider adopting that could provide value to the members of the profession. And the key finding, based on our review of other organizations, is that they use pretty similar models to what we use. The funding amounts may differ. In particular, we saw a lot of one of the recommendations I kind of flew over on the funding slide is that we establish a 1 million endowment to fund the whole awards program, and that idea was inspired by the Social Workers National Association. And we also did see that other organizations were moving to certificates instead of the really nice plaques as a way to reduce costs. So that is the only real recommendation, those two recommendations that came out of our other models. However, I'm sure as we move forward, if we missed one, and goodness knows there's a million out there, it would be great to know. And then this last slide is kind of transition to the next part. So as I said in the beginning, as Miranda said, there were two things that were clear from the work that we did. One is that the awards are tremendously valuable. I think there were a number of us that felt that in a personal way on the committee, whether that's as a recipient or as serving on one of these amazing committees that identifies people who do win the award, right? But there were also significant structural issues related to our current model based on the questions we were looking at. So there wasn't a way to integrate EDI across all of the awards that, we couldn't find evidence of that. We found evidence of perennial issues with funding. There wasn't a way that we could see within the system to identify overlapping gaps in the process. So we had these two very different things that we were holding in our heads, and the clock was ticking. So where we ended up is, the recommendations are a way to get at the structural problems, but we also thought it was imperative, and I think this is maybe a piece that got missed, is there's a lot of good from the existing system that shouldn't just be thrown out. So this working group and the insistence that they have at least a year to figure out how to make all this work together is really foundational to all of the recommendations we made. because there is a lot to figure out how to make it work. And that's all we have. It's over. Back to you, Julie.
Thank you, Miranda and Aaron. I appreciate that great overview of the work. And again, thank you for all of the work that you've done and the great care that you've taken in investigating what our current awards program is and how we can make it even better. So with that, what I would like to do, I see that there are a few questions that are starting to bubble up, and I appreciate those. Before we get to answering your questions, we would like to ask you a couple of questions and get your feedback because we are taking this forward. We are at a point where we have taken the very difficult step of saying we're going to pause the awards until we figured out what we're transforming the awards to. And with that, there's a lot to be done, as Miranda and Aaron have pointed out. So we have two questions we'd like to pose to you, and in answering these, you're welcome to raise your hand and we will unmute you to address them. You can put a comment in the Q&A if you'd prefer to do that. And again, we will share an email address where you can send your answers. The first question that we have is, of the recommendations for change, what do you see as the most important structural issue that needs attention? And I'm going to also post this in chat so you have it before you. So I'll give folks a moment to think about that. And if, again, you're welcome to raise your hand or to provide something in the Q&A. I see Veronica Douglas has her hand raised. Could we unmute Veronica so she could speak?
Hi, can you all hear me? Great, thanks for taking our questions today. I appreciate it. So I am chairing the instruction section for a few more months. And one of the kind of bigger issues our section has is, well, a couple, but one in particular is, when will this working group determine what awards will continue to be given out? Will that criteria be shared with section members? If we do move to this division level award committee, how do we ensure that we have the expertise to adequately sort of like judge nominees for different kinds of awards? And thinking about instruction section, say for example, the Rockman Award, the people on that committee have a deep knowledge of information literacy and read a significant number of papers. So I'm just curious about what those awards will look like. How do we ensure we have that expertise on that working group as a division?
Thank you, Veronica. I see that Brian Vitruba, excuse me if I mispronounced your name, has.
Hi, can you hear me? Yeah, it's Vitruba. Thank you. I am the vice chair-elect of S, and I am a when WES existed before it was merged with CEAS. I was a chair of the awards committee back then. And that was the time when we were trying to find a new sponsor, which was, we came up with Debruder. But one of the things that we encountered was the 20% overhead fee that ALA charges. And that proved to be a very much a stumbling block for many vendors that were interested in providing funding for an award. And they just could not believe that that was necessary. And then looking at what ACRL and ALA does or for our awards, you know, most of the work was done by committee members. Other than putting an ad in CNRL News and announcing the award, there wasn't that much done. So I guess, you know, I don't see that that was addressed by the ad hoc committee. And I'm wondering if there's any room to negotiate with ALA on that amount. I mean, I understand there has to be some type of overhead fee, but that just seems really exorbitant.
Thanks for your comment. I know that ALA is also conducting a working group, and fees and all of that may be part of it. And of course, they're also working to sustain the program as well. So I'm sure that there's a mix in terms of what those costs are. Jody Girding, excuse me if I mispronounced your name. Jody, you're unmuted if you have a comment.
So I was unmuted, but I am not Jody, so I don't know what happened. So my name is actually Emma Sarconi. I'm the chair of the LEAB Awards for RBMS. And I was wondering if we could speak a little bit more about, you know, you pointed out that the LEAB Awards is a very narrow focus. We also have our own funding source. So I was sort of curious as to see, as to hear how you envision the LEAB Awards would be impacted by this work. And frankly, like if taking an additional pause year is necessary, given our sort of extraordinary role within the ACRL Awards program.
So does that have to do with the structural issue that you see most important to consider?
Oh, I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry. I was distracted because I'm also on the front desk of my department. We can keep that question for later.
Okay, thank you. We have another hand raised. It looks like it's Samantha, and I can't see the last name.
Yeah, I'm Sam Harlow. Can y'all hear me okay?
Yes.
So I'm the chair of ACRL Distance and Online Learning section, and our award is the Rutledge Award. And I second what everyone's been saying as the recommendation, particularly what Veronica is saying is that we have this issue now of a committee that's never worked with our awards. And we've now also kind of lost the relationship of the vendor of Rutledge, of who was paying for the award. So logistically, in terms of important structural issues that need our attention, is that no one on our awards committee wants to continue being on an awards committee with no work. So in terms of dealing with people who are volunteering their time and wanting to be moved to other committees and not having this committee, if awards are unpaused in the future, how should we move forward in terms of logistically moving them into other committees and thinking about how we could do awards without, you know, within our section, you know, like moving like awards to being like highlighting our members, you know, without a monetary kind of situation.
Thank you. Okay, I see one other comment from Veronica, and then I have a second question that I'd like to ask.
Hi, yeah, this is Veronica again. I just wanted to second Sam's question. We're sort of at the point within instruction section where we just want to redistribute the members from those awards committees onto other committees. There's been a lot of frustration over the year about not having any work and not knowing what this next year would bring. And now knowing that we have another pause, you know, we'd really like to move those volunteers into positions where they can contribute to the section as they volunteered to do. So what then do we do with those awards committees? Can we sunset those?
Thanks. Okay, the second question that I have that we'd like to get feedback on is ACRL works toward advancing recommendations to transform the future of the awards program. What do you want to make sure is known or is addressed as part of the process? Anything else? So definitely what I'm hearing is there are some structural things that are happening now that need to figure out what do we do with the people who are currently in place who won't have work to do to deliver or to determine awards in the short term, and what can you do to redeploy those volunteers who want to give back to the association. There's also some challenge about making sure that people are prepared then to do the work when it gets reestablished. I've heard those two things. Are there other things that are on your mind that have to be addressed as part of this process? I see we have two individuals with hands up. Let me find who. I'm not finding them.
It's Clarence, Carrie, and Robin. They should be at the top of the attendees list.
Yes, I'm at the top, and for some reason they're not. So go ahead, Clarence first, and then Robin.
Hi, I'm Clarence Mabey from Purdue, and I am a rep at large in the instruction section. And I think this has sort of been talked about before, but not answering the question that you asked, which I think that one concern I have about a centralized award committee, and this is, I recently attended the Rockman Award Committee meeting, and actually members brought this up, is the idea of would a centralized committee, have the expertise that's already been brought up, but also the interest, right, in the different kinds of awards that we might offer. So some way to address that in the new model would be important.
Thank you. And then Robin.
Yes, my name is Robin Brown. I'm the chair of CJCLS, which is the community college section of ACRL. My main concern about a streamlined committee is would they meet the needs of the community college librarians? We provide awards specifically to our population. We have one award for a library and one award for an individual. And like all the others, there's a concern. I don't know whether, if we go back to it's been funded by EBSCO in the past. I don't know whether they're still interested if it gets restarted. But I have a concern that if you're going to funnel it all into the greater ACRL, well, the greater ACRL is dominated by university and four-year colleges. Thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you, Robin, for that comment. Let's see, I have Carrie Forbes, and then after Carrie, Melissa Wong.
Hi, can you hear me okay? Great, thank you so much. Hi, this is Carrie Forbes. We're very popular talking today from the instruction section. Just one other quick thing that I think you might want to consider is that a number of the awards across all the sections are named after people. So in the instruction section, we have the Rockman Award and the Miriam Dudley Award. And I'm just not sure, as far as honoring the people that those awards are named after, how a centralized committee that might impact the nature of the award or even the person's family who the award is named after. So just something to consider for that. Thank you.
Thank you. Melissa.
Good morning. Can you just confirm that you can hear me? Okay, great. My name is Melissa Wong. I am the current chair of the instruction section's Rockman Committee. One of the issues that we hope would be looked at by another task force would be the workload of jurying some of these awards. So in the Rockman Award, for instance, we read over 30 publications, books and articles and white papers in about a 6-week period. So it's a very intense workload in addition to requiring some expertise with instruction. And we feel like, I know that in the past, the instruction section had one committee to jury its 3 awards. And about 3 years ago, they broke into 3 separate committees because of the workload issue. So I think that's a real concern with having a consolidated committee. And for us, that also connects to issues of equity. So I understand, and I think it's fantastic that ACRL is trying to look at equity in the awards process, but earlier Marinda mentioned the Rockman Award having made changes in its nominations process to improve equity, but that's only working because we took away a really time-intensive process where somebody had to write a letter and justify why a publication was worthy of the Rockman Award. Getting rid of that requirement generated more nominations for us, but it means that the committee does have to carefully read and consider all of those publications and have the expertise, because no one is telling us that an award, is making a novel contribution to the field, et cetera, et cetera. So thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Donna Wittick.
Hello, can you hear me? Hi, I'm Donna Witek. I am a member at large on the instruction section executive committee. And I'm mostly just putting out there a framing that I'm wondering if the board and the future task force might ingest and consider. It's a framing that the ACRL talks about all of the time. And that's the idea of communities of practice. Because what I'm hearing as a major concern is the worry that a centralized committee tasked with possibly, as far as jurying, either a similar slate of awards that we offer now or predecessors of them, evolutions of them, that there's something innate that's going to be lost. And I would echo that concern by taking something that is, it's peers honoring peers in very distinct and specialized and identity-driven communities of practice, and losing the power and the meaning, and also the efficiency in terms of understanding the work of those peers, and being able to turn around thorough vetting processes because of it. Just to think, division level versus section level, it sounds as though a possible end game is that sections won't be able to honor their communities of practice. And I know that I'm reading into that recommendation by saying that it's not actually in there, but I would say hold close, perhaps trying to avoid that, the idea that sections and then, particular committees within sections who understand very specific work might not be supported in recognizing that work. Thank you.
Thank you. I understand that certainly we want to make sure that we improve things, not make it more difficult in order to manage the awards and to honor folks. So I understand that concern, and certainly that wouldn't be the intent. We do have a few additional individuals who would like to provide a comment. So I'm going to call on people who have not yet had a chance to speak. And we do have quite a few questions that have been posed. So I'm going to save the last 5 minutes for us to pose questions. I'm going to ask also Jay if he would put into the chat box the email address where people can provide additional comments to us. So I see that there is Jeremy Darrington who has a comment.
Hi, can you hear me? So I really appreciate all the comments that have been made, and I would share a lot of those concerns that people have articulated, especially what Donna just said. I think there's a lot of wisdom in that. And I guess my question, and if you're going to address the questions that are in the Q&A, I just kind of wanted to follow up and understand, because from what I can tell from all the comments, a lot of us are very concerned about the notion of there being a single awards committee, right? For all the reasons mentioned plus others. And I think one of the ones that has been sort of alluded to, maybe not quite explicitly stated, is that, the notion of having a community of your peers be able to judge your work, and then that's really valuable to people to know, like, it's not just like some anonymous bureaucracy that says, oh, this seems good for whatever reasons. It's, people that do similar work to me understand what goes into that work and recognize that work as valuable. I think that's an important part of this awards program generally. But I would just want to know if you could elaborate a little bit more as to like why, there are a lot of recommendations in the report, and a lot of those recommendations I think a lot of us feel are really valuable. But I wanted to understand more about what your thinking is to why some of these particular concerns led you to recommend having a single awards committee, as opposed to pushing out a number of these disparate recommendations directly into the awards committees themselves at the section level to say, here are some things we want you to work on in terms of improving DEI concerns, opening up the nominations process, working towards securing funding long-term or whatever.
Thank you. What I will do is I will ask Miranda and Aaron to share that as the first question that gets answered. There's one other comment that I'd like to allow, and that is Samantha Harlow had a comment.
Oh, thank you. It will be really quick. It's just that there was an ACRL distance and online learning section, Dole's anti-racism and EDI task force this year. And I believe there were many other anti-racism and EDI task force from other sections as well. And we surveyed members, met with our members, and found suggestions. And a lot of them had to do with how we could award members for work, for EDI and equity work in terms of our strategic mission related to our section. And I know we don't have time to talk about this today, but I just hope that the task force moving forward would look at all these different working groups that are already, again, surveying and working with their members in terms of what we want to see with that as well moving forward.
So we have a few minutes left to answer questions, and I'm going to let Aaron and Miranda start. What I would want to say is I'm scanning the questions, and I know a lot of them are around what's going to happen. And we haven't lived into the recommendations yet. There is a lot more that has to be explored before we do. So because the board has accepted the report doesn't mean yet that everything has changed, right? It still does have to be explored. So that is one thing that I hope will help to calm people's fears, that the goal is to make this better, to streamline this, and to make it easier for us to have awards be an excellent program and that is sustainable. With that, I'll ask Aaron and Miranda if they can ask a little or respond a little bit to the one committee question, because that does seem to be a major factor that's being communicated.
Sure, Miranda and I. How about we tag team this? So from my perspective, if you go back and read our actual recommendation, it's that we're kind of talking about two different groups, right? So first, we envision an ad hoc committee to figure out all of these excellent questions y'all have asked, because as a task force, we had the same question and we recognized we did not have enough time. And again, remember from our perspective, and the board has made some wise decision, but from our perspective, our recommendation was to resume we were given a timeline such that the awards program would resume as it is right now. And then for a number of reasons that wasn't feasible, but we wanted to get our recommendations out so that people can get back to work, because the first thing in our presentation is that these awards matter. They're valued, and not just by, the award committees that administer them and the people that receive them, but from the library community. So our recommendation was there are a lot of really great questions and a feasibility, kind of component to this recommendation. So our recommendation was that there'd be an ad hoc working group to answer these questions, and that working group would be composed at a minimum of with representation from all of the committees that currently administer awards, because we found so much good there. Particularly, you know, we did give the shout out to the Rockman for the work they had done in removing barriers to access. So we didn't want to build a process where any of that would be lost or ignored or overlooked. But then it would be the work of that group to figure out what the single overarching committee looks like, including how it's divvied up. So we were even thinking about, I don't know how familiar y'all are with the Value of Academic Libraries Committee, but that's a division level committee that has all kinds of subdivisions that do specialize on individual parts of that larger charge. So, you know, we weren't necessarily coming to this with a particular dream of how it would look. We came to it with there's a lot of good here. There are structural problems. Somebody really needs to tackle building a new model.
Well said. I don't have anything to add to that, Erin, just that our recommendation is that there is a lot of suggestions to come into play with lots of committees, and that a larger, that the next iteration of a task force to look at these would be able to look more at what kind of committee should be created and how that involves sections. We didn't get any further than that, really.
Oh, and I guess I didn't talk about, you know, why a single committee, and that really comes back to the structural issues that we've identified in terms of funding, in terms of an overall comprehensive review process for the awards and how they fit together as a program, and the integration of EDI in a way that is consistent and makes sense across the program. So any of the things that were across the program, there was lots of good work done, but it wasn't consistent, and it was a little bit, you know, unsure or uneven in the questions we asked.
Okay. Well, we are at time, or over time, actually. I want to thank Miranda and Erin for sharing with us the work that they've done. I want to thank all of you for your comments, very thoughtful suggestions as to what needs to be incorporated in our next steps as we move forward. We do want to do this work quickly as we can, do it in a way that brings together some resolution and we have some stability going forward, and we aren't looking at this with another task force in another 2 years. So there are the two questions that were posed. I put into the chat again. Jay did share how you could give feedback, additional feedback, both short-term and a little bit longer. And I see there are a number of questions. I've copied those, and I'm sure that ACRL staff has as well. And what we'll do is we'll work to provide some themes, put those in themes and provide some answers that we'll get out after this town hall. So I want to thank all of you for your time and investment in this issue and helping us to move forward. So thank you again. I think we can stop the recording now, Lauren.